Today we're going to be talking about the Boston Massacre. In your groups, you'll be watching this video and pausing it frequently to decide and talk amongst yourselves about how to understand this event. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to do just that. Stop the video and then free write a response to the following question. The question you'll write about before we begin is, what do you know about what happened in Boston before March 5th, 1770? Stop the video now and write your answer to that question for yourself, and then share out with your group. Try and do it quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Some important information to know about the Boston Massacre was that Boston had been the center of a conflict between the colonists and the British government for years following the 7 Years' War, which was a war fought all around the world, but mostly in North America, between the French and the British. By 1770, though, the British had stationed more than 4,000 troops inside of the city of Boston to maintain law and order. The population of Boston at the time was approximately 15,000 people, meaning that the troops made up a very large percentage of the population, with one soldier for almost every 3 Bostonians. Residents of Boston were also upset by the presence of these soldiers, and there were frequent confrontations between the British soldiers and the colonists. And on February 22nd in 1770, an 11-year-old boy named Christopher Sider was shot and killed by British customs officials during a protest. Bostonians were outraged by his death, and it was widely publicized. So on March 7th, there was a violent confrontation between British soldiers and colonists in Boston. British soldiers ended up killing 5 colonists in an event that became known as the Boston Massacre. The events leading up to the Boston Massacre were very chaotic, meaning unpredictable and wild. And there were many conflicting accounts about what took place. Today, we're going to be exploring a series of documents in order to answer these questions about what happened in Boston on March 5th, 1770, and who was ultimately responsible. The answers won't be given to you. You'll have to decide for yourself and support your answer using evidence from the documents. I'd like you now to pause the video and consider a few questions about the Boston Massacre. I want you to try and note what you can see in this picture. Who is in it? What are they doing? And what's happening? Try and write down any information about who's there, where they are, and who's dying, who's not, and why they might be fighting. Once you finish sharing with your group, start the video again and we'll go on. As historians, we never want to accept a single account as evidence of what happened in the past. So let's take a look at a second picture of this event. Again, you'll stop the video and talk about it in your group, asking what you can see in the picture and what you think it means. Look for participants, locations, actions of the British troops, casualties, and causes. Once you've identified what you think you see, share it with your group, and then restart the video. Now that you've described the video to each other, ask yourself, what image do you think presents a more trustworthy account of the Boston Massacre? The first image or the second image? And what other information would you want to know about the image to better understand the Boston Massacre? And what information would you want to help you to determine who's responsible for the violence? So consider these 3 questions, stop the video again, and talk it over with your group. Having come back now from meeting with your group, I want to share with you some information about these 2 images. The first image was created by Paul Revere. This is the image on the left that you're looking at now. And he titled it, "The Bloody Massacre in King Street." Revere was a silversmith and an engraver, and was actively involved in the efforts to resist British rule. He was a member of the Sons of Liberty and created engravings that sought to build opposition to the British. Revere began selling copies of Bloody Massacre 3 weeks after the event. He based it on an engraving by Henry Pelham, who was a loyalist. Pelham was never credited for his work. The second image, the one on the right, it comes from William Neal's book, The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. The book was published in 1855, and it was one of the earliest and most comprehensive books about American and African American history. Nell was an African American himself and an abolitionist from Massachusetts. He wrote for William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, and Frederick Douglass's newspaper, The North Star. He also worked to end segregation in Massachusetts public schools. In 1851, he lobbied the Massachusetts legislature to create a monument honoring Crispus Attucks. In 1888, after Nell's death, Boston installed a large monument commemorating the Boston Massacre, and Attucks was featured prominently. So, in your pairs, once again, stop and talk about these images. Discuss how this new information about Paul Revere and William Nell and their influence in describing this event in their picture might influence your evaluation of these sources.